Should you pull guard if you're doing jiu-jitsu? So I got Rob Bernack here today. We've never actually talked about this. I think we're on the same page, but we never know. We could end up violently disagreeing on this. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that absolutely you should pull guard. If I have mentioned this in the past, I think I may have mentioned it when we talked about competition, which is the last thing you want to do as a white belt in jiu-jitsu is go to a tournament and spend 5 minutes doing bad judo. Exactly.
Okay.
So, if you're there to compete in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu rule set, then absolutely you should pull guard. If you are going to compete in a no-gi sub-only rule set, definitely you should pull guard because the amount of effort and energy expended on getting a takedown in a no points, completely wasted. It's very, very difficult to get a takedown directly into side control, so you're going to take a guy down and beat his guard. Totally not worth it. As a combative...
If you're doing MMA...
Then you should not pull guard.
Right.
Right. If you're doing
MMA...
MMA...
There's a vast difference. It has been done successfully, but I think those are the exceptions rather than the rule.
Absolutely.
When there was a huge discrepancy.
Yeah, if we're talking about any circumstance where punches to the face are a thing, self-defense or MMA, you shouldn't be pulling guard. And again, depending on your skill set and your skill level, I mean, personally, if I got into a quarrel with a drunken gentleman at a bar, I would have no problem pulling guard. I'm pretty sure I could Imanari to a heel hook before he knew what was going on, or whatever other crazy thing I might want to do.
Well, you don't want to train for the lowest common denominator.
Exactly. So, could I? Yes. Would I? Maybe not. Furthermore to that point, I don't believe that you should pull guard so much as you should pull a sweep. So I wouldn't be so much an advocate of getting a grip and pulling guard and then hanging out here and playing De La Hiva guard. Right? What I would be an advocate of, we just got to move over here a little bit, is as soon as I get my grip, for one, always making an effort to break your opponent's alignment. This goes for takedowns or no.
So it's Kazushin Judo where you're off balancing me and then throwing me, you're off balancing me and then pulling guard.
I certainly don't want to make a grip and then pull guard. One, it's more obvious, and two, I'm pulling guard against an opponent who's in perfect alignment, and there are no subsequent threats. So if I make my initial grip, I'm pulling you forward to draw a reaction, which means that you will either posture up, and I may be able to come in on a takedown if I know one, or you will stay down, but I'll get to pull into an immediate off-balancing that may result in an initial sweep, depending on the pull that I happen to favor.
And you're using the momentum that you've, standing to the ground.
Yes.
You do have potential energy.
Exactly.
So you can, the easiest example there is Tomonage, the judo throw where you're throwing the guy over your head.
Yeah.
You're using the energy of you dropping to give the whole system.
Exactly.
Impart some energy to it.
Yeah, so in my academy, I teach guard pulls, but they're not guard pulls. They are sweep pulls. We pull directly to sweeps based on what kind of guard the student happens to favor, and then work from there.
And if the sweep doesn't work,
then you've pulled guard, exactly. And then, but then not only have you pulled guard and you're getting to play guard in a more favorable alignment to you, but the initial sweep will have failed because of a reaction on your opponent's part that will usually lead to a potential submission attempt or a follow-up sweep or whatever. So you're initiating the action with a lot of initiative. And when you have the initiative in a match, it's better than if you don't.
I'm going to say there are at least two other factors that we need to consider here. Number one is that training takedowns, although it's important for self-defense, although it's important for MMA, and possibly important for jiu-jitsu or submission grappling, they're very time-intensive to learn, and is also inherently much more dangerous. Because anytime that you're falling through the air, if you're sweeping me, typically one of us is down, one of us is up. The sort of average height of both of our bodies is somewhere between 1 and 2 feet on the ground. Right now, we're standing, our center of gravities are, 3-4 feet up, and if you do the perfect judo throw, you're hoisting me through the air, I'm going to go up to the height of 6 feet, and I'm then crashing down.
Exactly.
And then you're going to do that to me if we're drilling, and the odds of one of us getting hurt, either training that or just drilling that, are just astronomically higher than the ground.
Not only that, if you look at, again, the training and how competitive it can be, certainly when it comes to wrestling takedowns, you see people turning their back and posting their hands a lot to avoid a takedown. And again, if you have people who aren't familiar or are familiar but aren't temperamentally inclined to go lighter in the development stages. And so what I mean is beginners tard out is what I'm saying. So having a bunch of beginners partying out doing wrestling is much more likely to cause an injury. I prefer, and I do teach takedowns at my academy, I prefer to teach takedowns to people that have shown the commitment of competing. If you're a hobbyist who's going to come in once or twice a week to do jiu-jitsu, frankly, your commitment level is not high enough to where you're going to be able to train and avoid injuries, because you won't be in good enough shape, and B,
because it's also harder.
Because it's harder.
Yeah.
It's more difficult. And so you won't be in good enough shape, and B, the time that you will need to invest to learning proper break falls and just how to go through the movement safely, you're not going to invest in that time. So anytime we actually do takedowns, you're going to be at a higher risk of injury yourself, higher risk of injury to your opponent, because you'll be super tense, you'll be going too hard. So it's really something that I was like, takedowns are a privilege, not a right, is how I would put it, right? Like, anybody who wants to just play the game of jiu-jitsu can come in and play guard and all that. But if somebody wants to learn how to take people down, that's a more serious endeavor, and if you show that you're willing to do it, by all means, let's do it. But let's do it in a way that's safe, because you've already spent enough time learning how to be a safe training partner. So it's not a day one thing. And then in addition to that, I do believe that takedowns, very much the same way that when we use leg locks as an alternative threat, I don't want to say it's a distraction, but if I use a committed leg attack to make your response so that I can pass your guard, or I go to pass your guard with a lot of commitment, and then you react to that guard pass in a way that allows me to entangle your legs, I believe that guard pulls should be a part of your takedown game. I don't think you should be, especially as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, because the guard is such a powerful position, I don't think you should be trying to just do takedown, takedown, takedown. I think the idea of potential guard pull, sacrifice throw, combined with takedowns is a much more powerful tool, because you're disorienting your opponent more with multifaceted attacks.
What about the argument that it's not worth the time spent to train takedowns when such a potentially small percentage of the game is going to be on the feet? Like, if you get a reputation for being a really strong player on your feet, because you've got your black belt in judo, or you've done years and years of wrestling, my strategy is pretty clear. I am going to pull guard. And so now you've spent all this training time that you could have been spending doing other things, focusing on takedowns, and thus the rest of your jiu-jitsu game isn't going to be hard, because everybody's limited by the amount of hours in the day and the amount of wear and tear they put on their body. So, there's an argument against it from if your focus is just pure competition, because we spend so little time there. It does allow you to, of course, control whether you're on the top or the bottom, and that's valuable.
Absolutely. And so in that sense, I would absolutely agree that it comes down to, as a competitor, what do you want to focus on in terms of rule sets. There are now multiple rule sets in jiu-jitsu. There are certainly multiple rule sets in grappling. If you look at ADCC, that's a very wrestling-heavy tournament. If you want to go into that tournament and not be good at wrestling, you better be leagues ahead of everyone you're facing in terms of submissions and guard play, which is difficult.
That's a high bar to clear.
That's a very high bar to clear. So now what you've done is you've taken your narrow focus in another direction. You're saying, I'm only going to be good at these things. So I think the more well-rounded grapplers are the ones that can do, obviously, takedowns, submissions, and guard play and all that kind of stuff. But those grapplers might not be the ones to excel over the spectrum of rule sets. Guys who are great at IBJJF might do terrible in ADCC because they just have abysmal wrestling for that level. And guys, again, who are really fantastic.
Pancration experts.
Exactly. So depending on your particular preference for rule set, getting really good at takedowns is maybe not something you want to invest your time in. If you want to do either ADCC, MMA, or have a predilection towards the self-defense side, I think that as a black belt, you should be able to effectively take people down at your level. And hope that I live up to that standard. But yeah, I'm a huge advocate of pulling guard. I spent a few matches in competition where I was trying to get a takedown, and then I realized what am I doing? This is a jiu-jitsu match. I'm not gonna try to beat this guy in judo rules. I'm gonna pull guard. So.
Yeah, and let's find out who's better.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you pull guard and the guy smashes your guard, passes you, and chokes you out, well, at least he beat you doing what you've been training.
Exactly.
So, well, let's just before we go, just brainstorm a little bit. What do you think the main technique? If somebody's going to put a unit of energy into takedowns, either for self-defense purposes or MMA, or even just jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
What are some of the takedowns I should focus on? I'm single leg, double leg. I think that's fairly clear from wrestling.
Yeah, from a wrestling perspective, single leg, double leg. From a judo perspective, a gi perspective, I would invest heavily in the collar drag single. There's a
Even though that would get you kicked out of every judo tournament now.
Yes, yeah, which is ridiculous. But again, if you there's a recent match between Yuri Simões and Travis Stevens. Travis Stevens is an awesome judoka, and Yuri Simões is a jiu-jitsu guy. And I think the smart money going into that match was there's not a chance in hell that Yuri takes Travis down, and yet he absolutely did, hitting collar drag to single leg. So I think that's one of those movements that you can invest a lot of time in, that unless you want to strictly compete in judo rule set. But if you want to invest in a takedown for the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu rule set, then the collar drag is a good takedown that if you're working that single double for no-gi is now going to work very easily within what you're already doing. Whereas if you try to learn like actual throws, if you're trying to learn like an EP116 or uchimata, then for one, you've got to get your hips in a hell of a lot closer, which is kind of tricky to do, especially against jiu-jitsu guys who just start like this. Whereas getting the collar grip and attempting the collar drag is a really great way to set up guard pulls and ankle picks. So I would say collar drag to single, and then fake guard pull to ankle pick, or collar drag to ankle pick. Those are the two takedowns that I think you're going to get the most mileage.
And I'd say from a self-defense perspective, because most of the time in a self-defense situation, you're not, if you're grappling a completely naked male, then you've really gone to the wrong part of town. Maybe there's a leather harness.
Or the right part of town, depending on...
But I think something like the Osotogari, that does work without a ton of training. To pull it off against a high-level judo guy and a high-level jiu-jitsu guy, that's pretty challenging. But I don't think it's as high a skill investment required as for something like an uchimata. And then maybe a sacrifice throw or two. If you're skilled in jiu-jitsu, the risk of doing a tomonagi or a sumigaeshi... Sumigaeshi,
I would actually say, is the other throw that I've built a huge amount of my arsenal around, because I don't mind somebody grabbing a single leg or grabbing my hips, and especially if you incorporate the kimura in the sumigaeshi. And another thing I guess I should probably bring up is I think that if you are going to devote a fair bit of time to developing a takedown game, even if you want to make it really narrow with just those things that we've talked about, then before you even bother with the takedowns, invest some time in hand fighting.
Yes.
And learning how to create proper angles with your attacks.
Hand fighting for no-gi, grip fighting for gi.
Yes, and proper level changes in head fighting, right? So, if you look at any good wrestling coach will usually tell you that, your hands, your head, and then the hips. I should never just give you my hips. So I want to make you get past my hands and my head. So the hand fighting and the head fighting that will give you the angle, that will pay off hugely in your jiu-jitsu. Even if you only ever pull guard, the ability to hand fight once you have pulled guard is going to determine whether or not you're playing guard or defending a guard pass. So I would say, even before you ever invest in takedowns, invest in hand fighting and head fighting.
Awesome. All right. Well, unfortunately for the people listening, we didn't actually have that many disagreements about this. So they've got two people pontificating from the same pulpit on the same topic with the same opinion. But whatever. They don't like it, they can get their money back.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob.